In here, good morning. It is still morning. I'm Robert Kinney. I'm the president of Xcel Energy Colorado. We asked you to be here today because we wanted to provide a quick update on how things are progressing with the restoration process post public safety power shutoff. I think, as some of you know, we had to execute a public safety power shutoff on Wednesday because we saw extreme weather conditions. That means we had exceedingly high winds coupled with low relative humidity and dry fuel on the ground, which created a high threat and risk of a wildfire. And so we proactively de-energized lines in 5 counties to protect the public. That wind event subsided at around 6 p.m. yesterday. Our crews spent the night last night inspecting our lines. We had about 678 line miles attributable to the public safety power shutoff that had to be inspected. Also, because of the wind, we had a bunch of other customers that were out just because of damage caused by the wind that had nothing to do with the PSPS itself. And so, all told, at the height of the outages, we probably had something like 150,000, 160,000 customers out. We're still in the process of restoring customers. It's very difficult to predict when we will have final restoration numbers. We've restored about 122,000 customers so far, and our crews are continually working around the clock to get customers restored as quickly as possible. I want to thank you all for being here, but I most importantly want to thank our customers and our communities for their patience and understanding as we continue to work very diligently to get them restored as quickly as possible. You may or may not be able to see it, but we're seeing very extreme winds right now. We are expecting to see more extreme weather move in tomorrow. We expect to see winds that are even higher than the winds that we saw on Wednesday. And just to give you an example, or just to give you some context, we saw winds in some locations upwards of 100 miles per hour. I think our max wind speed was 116 miles per hour at one location. We expect to see winds of a similar sort and many that are going to be in excess of that. So 75 to 90 miles per hour. The relative humidity is even lower. And so we're expecting that we're going to need to execute another public safety power shutoff tomorrow morning. That's why we're working very diligently to get as many customers restored as possible today before we move into the next event on Friday. Let me just pause there and I'll take some questions because I'm certain you have some.
Robert, how many customers are still without power right now?
We've got approximately, as of about 11 o'clock, we had about 80,000 customers that are still out.
Of the outages yesterday, what was the total number of customers without power?
We think it was about 160. It might have been up to 200 at the peak, but some of those might not have been attributable to PSPS. So we have outages routinely throughout the course of a day just because of equipment failures. So what's attributable to PSPS or an ordinary outage or a wind-related outage is difficult to discern.
How many crews are out working on those lines?
So we've got about 375 crews. It's about 1,000 or more people because there's 2 to 3 person crews.
I think there was an assumption from the general public that when there was a PSPS shutoff, it would come back on quicker than a normal power outage. Is that accurate?
That's not accurate. We actually did a press availability on Wednesday, and I want to make sure I dispel the confusion. The wind event subsided at 6 o'clock. We cannot flip a switch and turn the power back on at 6 o'clock. And the reason that that's the case is that if there's a wire that has been damaged and is down on the ground because of the wind, if we were to remotely re-energize that line, you've just created the very risk you're trying to abate. And so we have to physically inspect all of the lines. That's the PSPS lines that we de-energized proactively. And we also had to inspect the lines that were damaged through the wind event. So the power was never going to come back on at 6 o'clock, and I apologize if there was confusion about that. We tried to be very precise that power will not come back on the minute the wind conditions improve, because we have to physically inspect. And so we do that with foot patrols, and people put their eyes on it, but we also use drones and we use helicopters. As you might imagine, we can't fly drones and helicopters in high winds because it's unsafe, and we can't fly the helicopters at night. And so we had crews out working at night, and then first light, we flew drones and helicopters.
Obviously, there's a lot of people who are very frustrated that the power is still off. How how would you say your communication is going so far?
You know, part of the reason we're doing this is because we took a lot of the feedback from the April event and we wanted to make sure that we were communicating early and frequently. We've been doing press releases. We've been doing calls 2 to 3 times a day with our offices of emergency management, who are then pushing out communications to their communities. So every county has an office of emergency management. The state has an office of emergency management. We're embedded with them and we're constantly communicating with them at least 2 to 3 times a day. And then that's why we wanted to do this event as well.
But are you happy with your communication and Xcel's communication to your customers?
I think we are communicating as frequently as we can and as transparently as we can. Having said that, I know there's always an opportunity for improvement, and I know that that's never going to satisfy everybody, but we are trying to take the feedback that we heard from last year and communicate as frequently and as transparently as we possibly can.
Xcel has said that your power lines did not start the Marshall Fire. So if that is true, why is something like this necessary?
Well, let me just say we didn't start the Marshall Fire, and I don't want to conflate two things. We're doing this. I'm letting that car pass by. Proactive de-energization of the power lines is to protect the public from the risk of an ignition. Separate and apart from Marshall or any other fire. This has nothing to do with Marshall Fire at all. This is all about making sure that we are taking the necessary proactive precautions to prevent an ignition from happening.
You said crews spent the night working last night. Jefferson County Public Schools sent an email out saying that crews stopped at 11:30 and it would resume at 7 a.m. Is that accurate?
Yeah, we did stop. Some of our crews had to stop at 11:30 because, as you might imagine, they'd been working 16 hours. And for the safety of our coworkers, they have to stop working at 16 hours. They have to get rest, and then they came back first thing in the morning.
Working 16 hours, I thought they started at 6 p.m. because you couldn't go out beforehand. It was unsafe.
But they'd already been working before 6 p.m. Their workday didn't begin at 6 p.m. So the wind subsided, and their ability to go inspect the lines didn't begin until 6 p.m. But we had pre-positioned crews all day. Those crews have been working well before 6 p.m. So they stopped at 11:30 because that's when their 16-hour shift ends, and then came back first thing in the morning. You also have to recognize that, you know, we want to protect the public and keep the public safe. We also have to keep our coworkers safe, and there's limits to the ability to work in the dark and work overnight, and there's limits to the ability to work when you're tired. It gets dangerous.
How many of the 375 crews had to stop overnight?
That I don't know the answer to that question.
Do you know how many of those 600 plus miles of power lines were damaged by the winds?
We're still assessing that. We had 678 miles of power lines that were proactively de-energized, and then we had damage that was separate from those, and so we're in the process of assessing that right now.
What can that damage mean for continued outages past tomorrow's PSPS?
So we will, if it's broken poles and cross arms and downed lines, we'll be able to do that relatively quickly. If it's more extensive damage than that, one of the things we've said is that could make the restoration process more challenging, and it could take longer. But we're about 60% restored as of 11 o'clock today. I think it's 11:30 now, and the crews are continually working. We're trying to get as much work as we can Thursday. We will work again as long as we can on Thursday before the next wind event comes in.
Yeah, you mentioned the next wind event tomorrow, trying to turn on the power today for just a few hours and then to turn it right back off. Is your goal to get to 100% before you have to turn it back off?
The goal is to get to as many as we can, and there will be some overlap between the Wednesday event and the Friday event, but not 100% overlap. So some of the,
How much overlap?
I don't have the specific number right now because we're still scoping the Friday event, and the weather continues to evolve, as you might imagine. But to your point, we don't want any customer to be out any longer than they have to, and so if there's a customer that's out on Wednesday that's also going to be in scope for Friday, we don't want them to be without power. So we're going to work to restore them, even if that means we're going to have to de-energize that line again on Friday.
A lot of customers have been looking at the power outage map as a reference and accuracy, but what do you say to those customers who might believe that right now it's not as accurate, and what should they do?
We've heard that feedback, and we're working as quickly as possible to make sure that our maps are up to date and accurate. We've heard and seen exactly what you're sharing with us, so I appreciate the feedback. Our tech people know that, and we're working to make sure that they're getting corrected as quickly as possible.
So what are their options right now if they can't refer to that?
Well, we would ask them to continue to check back and see, because we're updating the maps continually. As you know, the time between when we get the information from the field and the time it's fed into the GIS and then fed into the system, there's some gap there. But I would ask them to give us some grace, give us some patience, but continue to check back.
Robert, are you considering credits for homeowners, specifically businesses, who have lost a significant amount of money because of these planned shutoffs?
I'm really focused right now on keeping everybody safe and then getting those customers that aren't in power right now, getting them restored. We do have a claim process that's available on our website and people can refer to that, but right now I'm really focused on, I don't know what businesses are out, I don't want to speculate, so that's not something that's at the forefront of my mind at this very moment, except to say that we do have a claim process and customers can take advantage of that.
Robert, we've received a ton of questions about what work you've done to bury power lines, specifically along 93, the ones that snapped yesterday. Can you talk about why you haven't done more to bury lines in these areas that are in PSPS?
Yeah, so we have a wildfire mitigation plan that includes a whole suite of mitigation efforts. Some of it is targeted undergrounding of distribution lines where it makes sense. Some of it is replacing bare conductor with covered conductor. Some of it is placing small diameter wire. It doesn't necessarily mitigate the risk to do targeted undergrounding everywhere. So it depends on the geographic location, it depends upon the topography. So some risk mitigation is greater by replacing bare conductor with covered conductor. And so we are doing targeted undergrounding in some locations, but that's not necessarily the best mitigation everywhere.
And then last question for me, can you talk about when you draw those maps, a lot of people are confused about why their neighbor's power's on across the street, why
Sure.
theirs isn't. Just what goes into that grid?
Yeah, so you might have a neighbor who's being fed by a feeder that's different than your neighbor's feeder. And so in a feeder is a span of conductor from the substation to the step-down transformer and into the person's home. So it's not necessarily the case that your neighbor and you are being fed by the same feeder. And so without knowing the specific address, that's the best answer I can give you. But just to say, the way the system is designed, you're not necessarily all being fed by the same feeders.
And you know, for that other shutdown on Friday, do you have a timeline of when you...
Say that again, I'm sorry.
With that shutdown on
Oh,
Friday,
yeah.
do you have a timeline, a goal of when you hope to get everybody back online?
Yeah, it's as quickly as possible. It's very challenging to say. We know that the wind event on Friday is likely to be longer than this one. So this one started at 10 a.m. on Wednesday and subsided at 6 p.m. And then, again, the power will not come back on at the moment the wind event ends because we have to inspect the lines. Tomorrow we expect the event to potentially start as early as 5 a.m. and potentially last as late as 6 p.m. So it's a longer event. It's going to be more powerful winds, which would likely lead to more extensive damage. And so we've been saying we would like customers to make sure that they're prepared for potential multi-day outage because we're going to have a longer event, stronger winds, more damage. But we're similarly, we will pre-position crews and we will get people restored as quickly as possible. But the inspection has to happen first. That can't happen until the wind subsides. And then we have to assess the damage and then we have to make any repairs.
Robert, are there any areas that are not getting their power back on today? Any specific neighborhoods?
Well, I don't have any specific neighborhoods that are not getting their power back on. Our goal is to work as quickly as possible to get everybody restored as quickly as possible.
I want to make sure
one or two more questions and then we're gonna have to wrap
I want to make sure I understand the big question correctly.
The which question?
Well, just the big question that a lot of people are asking right now, which is when will my power come back on if it's been off for the past 2 days? Is the answer from Xcel as quickly as possible, but honestly we're not sure?
Well, I'd say it's as quickly as possible. We're working as safely as possible given the wind conditions. We're striving to get as many of the Wednesday customers back on today as possible so that they don't go into Friday without power.
But the answer is not. We will get power back on by this evening.
I don't want to definitively say that and then not be able to deliver it, but we're working as hard as our goal is to get everybody restored as quickly as possible. And I gave you some numbers of what we've restored thus far. It's about 122,000 customers that we've gotten restored thus far. So that's about 60%. So we're moving very quickly.
It's accurate, though, to say some of the people that lost power yesterday will likely not get it back until Saturday?
I don't want to say that, no.
All right, guys, sorry. Robert's got to get going, but thank you all so much.
Thank you very much for being here, and thank you for getting this information out to our customers.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.